Guardians are going to, or they already have clinched their second losing season since 2012 or 2013. Got some guys back. Some guys got banged up. We're learning more about what's going to happen in the offseason, and this is the final week of the Terry Francona era. All today on Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Again, we want to thank you for sticking with us through the end of this season. We understand that sometimes baseball is not fun when your team isn't good, but we still have the Guardians covered here. There's going to be, throughout this offseason, players changing, managers changing, information about land changing hands, and draft picks are going to be more important than ever. Some people are getting mad at me for mentioning them too much, but it is part of the equation at the end of the year. Speaking of things in the equation, Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. For those who don't know me, thanks to the Fast Channel, I'll say I am Jeff Ellis. Been the host of this here podcast since it started. One of the first hosts in this entire network, I think. In terms of baseball. And before that, I was a lead draft, hence my interest in the draft prospect analyst for Scout and 24/7.
I'm Justin Latta, coming up on a year here on the podcast. What a year it's been. Thanks for all those who are tuning in maybe for the first time on the Fast Channel. I've been covering the Cleveland baseball team for about over 10 years now, starting out in the minor leagues, IBI, GBI, where Jeff was, and also at the News Herald, the Morning Journal up here in Cleveland, and Prospects Live, all over the place. Jeff and I have both been all over the place in terms of prospects and this team. Jeff, guys who were prospects at one point, that would have been Shane Bieber and Triston McKenzie. As the Guardians are going to now finish under 500 for the first time. Well, they finished under 500, obviously, in 2021. Only by 2 games, and looks like they are going to wind up having a worse record this season than they did in 2021, because they are now 82 losses already. But just the second losing season in the Terry Francona era. We'll get to more on him this week, as he kind of enters his final stretch as the Cleveland manager. So stay tuned for all that. We may ask for some of your thoughts as well. But Guardians did at least get back Shane Bieber and Triston McKenzie from injury. We both assumed, I don't know, at least one of them was going to be succumbed to surgery at that point. I thought there was no way both would come back, but they're both back to varying degrees, and
we'll see how it goes, right? Like, part of me can't help but wonder, would it have been better in the long run if Bieber got in surgery the first time instead of having him miss half of the last 2 years and then be nowhere near as effective? But that's a debate for another day.
Yeah, well, this time was an elbow, before it was a shoulder, and shoulders are so much trickier than elbows. Just Tommy John is so much more common and effective, and you just never know what's going to happen with shoulder surgeries. And to Bieber's credit, he was pretty good last season, and he came back with essentially the same stuff this year and hasn't been quite as effective, but
he missed more bats than in that spot start, even though the velocity was low, than he missed in most of his starts this year. That was his issues. He could not get any swing and miss. He turned into Josh Tomlin. He was Josh Tomlin. That's what he was most of this year. And then, so even though the velocity still wasn't back and was even below where it was before, it was nice to see him missing bats facing a pretty good lineup.
Not only that, he snapped off 14 of his curveballs, which, we had seen over the last couple of years, that the decreasing usage of that curveball. And there's been a number of explanations for it, whether it's, he says matchup or working on other stuff or just game plan, all that kind of stuff. There's always been some sort of reasoning for that. So good to see that be his third most used pitch on Friday. Things didn't go good for him early, but he battled through it. He was able to get to 81 pitches. You certainly feel better about where he's at right now than McKenzie, because Bieber's rehab starts looked a lot better. I mean, I wouldn't really take anything into account in terms of results in the minors, and I wouldn't really, look too hard at those first couple starts back too, because they both missed a significant amount of time this year. But McKenzie's second rehab start, he had some control issues, and he gave a couple home runs too. But 6 walks, certainly don't want to see that. And really, he was only able to throw his fastball, and that might have been by maybe they told him stick to the fastball in this one, just try to reestablish it. But he never could establish his fastball, so he never got to go to the curve or the slider. He barely got to his other pitches because he could never really establish the fastball effectively. He threw 42 fastballs out of 52 pitches. He only threw 5 for called strikes. He did get a couple of foul balls, but he really just couldn't establish his stuff. So control is always a concern with an elbow injury. Like, velocity is one thing, right? Because sometimes you can throw through that, but usually when you see injuries like the elbow or something like that, it's the control that concerns you. When these guys start, like, usually control is the last thing to come back with surgery, right? But with the injury in general, if your control is a precursor to that, right?
Yeah, and it gave me some flashbacks of 2021 when he all of a sudden just lost his control and then had to go back to the minors. I thought it was interesting that is his career high for him, and they haven't had someone give up 6 walks since Trevor Bauer in April of 2019.
Wow,
like that's how long it's been, and he didn't even go 2 innings to get there. So he looked kind of. We're up to what? Is he up to 12 innings now on the year? Maybe a little bit more. Are we at 12 on the dot? Or is
yeah.
It... So yeah, 3 starts, 12 innings. You want him to? He'll probably get one more start, and hopefully there'll be some positive signs of life. But this has just been such a lost year.
It has. I mean, he had some life on his stuff in his first rehab start. I watched that pretty closely, and he had life on his stuff. Although it's hard to tell when you're facing AA hitters, right? You should be looking like a major league pitcher against them. And his start against Columbus wasn't quite as effective, and this one was a lot harder to watch. I mean, there's just no guarantee. Like, the reason they bring these guys back is because you want them to be able to have confidence that, I went out and I finished the year pitching and I felt good, and I'm not worried about rehabbing an injury over the offseason. I can have a normal throwing program. But there's no guarantees of elbow injuries. I mean, only the doctors, the players, and the team really knows the medical diagnosis of what's going on inside those elbows. If there's a partial tear or if it's just inflammation, whatever, we won't know until spring training, or if we hear news over the offseason that so-and-so has a sore elbow and a throwing program. So there's no guarantees. I mean, it would be great if these guys went out there and looked like their peak selves these last 2 starts. That's not going to happen. Bieber's definitely going to get one more start. They haven't said for sure McKenzie will, but he certainly could based on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
They already shut Tanner Bibee down, who, may or not been able to make a start if they really wanted to, but easy for them to just go ahead and say, like,
he couldn't have. He's on the 60-day disabled list. What are you talking about?
I meant before. And Logan Allen, we should talk about Logan Allen. So he was officially shut down with left shoulder inflammation. Look, I don't really have any specific intel here, but I tried to look everywhere I could in terms of quotes or articles, and no one was like, here's a comment on this shoulder injury, what we think. And it feels like this is a reason just to kind of cap his innings at the major league level for the year.
And I honestly don't think we'll see Gavin Williams pitch again. Everyone is composite over about 140 innings. I think like almost 150 for Allen, in the 140s for Williams, and Bibee was at almost 160. With the 2 rest days, I don't think I'd be surprised if they have any of them pitch. I think there's a good chance that the rookies are done. We'll then have the off day tomorrow.
Well, Williams is the only guy who could pitch at this point, because the other two,
our
other two on the IL, so they're definitely done.
But I think there's a good chance we just, Williams is an emergency. He's up here. He has pitched the least innings of the 3, and he's pitched. If you believe in major league innings having more wear and tear, more stress, he is well behind the other 2, because he's only had 82 innings at the major league level, where Tanner was at 142 and Allen's major league was at 125. So he is significantly behind them. So there's a chance, but I could also see a world where with 2 off days and 5 more games to go, that this could shift. And it's we're going to get into it in the second half of the show, but huge draft pick implications coming up with this Tiger series and a chance to really ruin the Red season as well with that series.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting last week here in Cleveland based on who plays, who doesn't, and how things go, and a chance to send Tito out on top with a nice, big, beautiful trophy, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. Well, if you didn't want to go out and watch any, or didn't want to go out to a tailgate or the game on Sunday or maybe Monday night, you want to order in for the Monday Night Football game, you should look to DoorDash. A lot of great things you can do from DoorDash. You can order home products, toilet paper, anything you might need, coffee creamer. You can get those things too. Obviously, you can order food. I've utilized it to order groceries and other things for elderly family members. So I was taking
really
care
good
of.
idea. Really good idea. I want to throw that out there again. I didn't think about that till Justin mentioned it, and having elderly people in my family taking care of. I want to say it's a genius idea.
It is, because really, if you're working every day and maybe you don't live close to this family member and they need groceries, they need some household items delivered and can't make the trip, or maybe they can't drive, DoorDash is a really easy way to get it for them. And when you use the code LOCKEDONMLB at checkout, you're going to get 50% off that first DoorDash order up to a $20 value, limited time offer, terms apply, 50% off. Use $20 minimum, 0 delivery fees on that first order as well, which is always a nice thing too. So if you don't already have the DoorDash app, download it and enter code LOCKEDONMLB. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for 50% off that first $20 order with DoorDash. No Guardians game on Monday, but Tuesday, it is the final chapter in 2023 of the Ohio Cup. You want it. We want it. We're going to be covering it all week because I know Jeff loves the Ohio Cup. It's 6:10. It'll be Lucas Giolito. I don't know who's going for the Reds. The Reds have I know Andrew Abbott's going Wednesday.
I think it's supposed to be Hunter Green, so it should be 2 fun.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And then Wednesday is Abbott and Bieber. So if you can't make it to the game, you can't watch it, you're doing something else on Tuesday. Maybe you're watching some action. Listen to the game on your Sirius XM app. Just search Guardians.
Before we get into it, I'm going to do everyone's favorite game. People do actually seem to like this. In the month of August, do you know who the Guardians' top 3 hitters are?
In the month of August?
Yes. We're into September. Why did I say August? I meant to say into September.
Into September?
Yeah, that's just in the month of September. Who are their top hitters?
Bo Naylor's got to be number 1.
He is.
Number 2 has got to be Andres Gimeinez.
Close. It's Josh.
Oh, it's Josh. Okay, so it's the Naylors and then Andres.
Gimeinez. Yeah. Here's the thing. Do you know that Ramon Laureano is 4th, and that if you go all the way down, Jose Ramirez is 6th? Like, I know we're kind of haven't discussed it, but he's again fallen off. This is going to be an interesting off-season flashpoint for him, and that's something we'll save for this off-season. But every time we think he's going back, it's been a bit of a wave. I'm just going to throw that out there. I know we don't have the time to really dive into it today, but maybe that's something we can get into on tomorrow's show. Is just,
I mean, it's an 800 OPS. Is that what you want from Jose Ramirez? It's definitely not. The numbers got better when Josh Naylor came back. The numbers were really bad without Josh Naylor.
But then they went back down after he came back too. They didn't stay up. He just had like a good weekend, and even with protection.
Yeah, 3 hits on Sunday.
I know, but even with good protection most of the year, he's had he's on his way to, he's like the 3rd worst year of his career, where he's been an everyday player. Which
says a lot about his career and also says a lot about, where he could be going. Sure, we'll definitely get into that over the offseason and at the end of the season. Andre, I mean, you got to feel good about.
Yeah, I mean, he's the only reason we didn't get no hit.
Yeah, I mean, Andres Gimeinez, I think
that's I agree. That is a massively positive sign. And I think Laureano's, listen, there's some gaps in there with him, but the fact that he is a 106 right now, since he's gotten here, that's a massive win for this team. Like having a 100, anyone with a 100 plus OPS in the outfield is a win. I mean, That's something, Stephen Kwan hasn't even been able to maintain most of the year. I mean, he's been around 100 all year, and I think he's at a 104 right now. But I'll take a Kwan and Lariano situation. So I think I'm just trying to point out some positives, because I know some people complain if we don't talk about the game at all. But just the ups and downs of those games, I do want to point out some of the positives with Gimeinez, Lariano. We can ignore Cole Calhoun.
Gimeinez, another home run off a lefty too, breaking up the no-hitter for John Means. His numbers this year against lefties continue to be good
for his career. I mean, that's the thing. That is for his career.
And now his numbers again this year are against lefties are much better than righties. So there's plenty of tangible evidence to suggest that Gimeinez hits lefties as well as he hits righties, if not better. And there's no need to platoon him and even make an argument to move up in the lineup next year. The only thing I would say about this little wave here in September that concerns me is that the walk rate is not good. It's 3.4% this month, and the batting average on balls in play is 409. So
That's not sustainable. He can't hit 400.
There might be somebody out there who can do that, but I don't know if it's Andres Gimeinez. As nice as the stretch is, hey, Shohei Ohtani could do it when he's healthy. I can believe that guy will do anything. Future Cleveland Guardian based on real estate acquisitions. We'll talk about that later this week. Now, I'm definitely pleased, or I feel better about the stretch with him, knowing it's there. Obviously, the level is not sustainable. I mean, 363, 402, 513. That's not going to be every month. He's only had 3 months this year where he's been over 100 WRC plus. And look, the last 2 months were 91 and 93. Is that great? No, because his OBP was below 300, so that's not great. He's running though. He's offering steals. He's definitely got to be better next year, obviously. But
he's always going to have that boom and bust to him offensively. We're going to have runs like this and then runs where he's terrible. I think there's going to be like some of what we complained about with Ahmed, where Ahmed would have those great months, but if it was cold, Ahmed didn't hit. The upside is Andres runs about as well as Ahmed, but the defensive value that he brings, you can live with it.
And there's still a chance that he could wind up being your shortstop next year. I mean,
opposed to that.
There's no guarantee that the defense translates evenly second to short. Like there's always a risk there with that. And I think it's worth at least thinking about in terms of, is it worth the risk? Because I mean, look, second baseman, the attrition rate's also high too. Moving to shortstop doesn't guarantee he's going to be injured or worn down or any less. Second base is a very high attrition rate in terms of health. And he's stayed pretty healthy despite the fact that he's been hit by a pitch a ton too. So, but that's at least an option for them. So if you at least get comparable defense, maybe he takes a tick down on defense, but it's still, maybe it's not Gold Glove level, but it's above average, and you get 30 steals, you get 15 homers, and hopefully you get 100 WRC plus. I mean, he's at 99 right now. Is that
down to 98 for being fair?
98. Is that a $100 million player? It's maybe not, but it's not, it's far from a sunken cost. And I do think that he's better than a league average hitter. Obviously, he's not as good as he was a year ago, but I think he might be better. Maybe, 110, 120. If you can get him at a 110 or a 120 with his defense and speed, I think that's
I think you're hoping for 110. 120
that's a cornerstone.
I mean, a 120 is what
it
is doing this year.
And then the end of the year for Bo.
Gimeinez is currently second in the league in hit by pitch. For those who might be curious about that fun little fact.
Arias was hit by a pitch over the weekend too. He left the game. Guardians say it's just a bruise, so hopefully he's fine. Bo Naylor left a game with a thumb contusion. He didn't play the next 2 days, so
he might be done.
It might be done. They don't seem concerned. They just said he'll play if he's fine. If not, we're not going to risk it, but it seems to be fine. I think we've talked about it a couple times, just how good Bo Naylor's second half has been in September. We should probably talk about it more this week, but it's just unbelievable, his offensive growth. His defense has been not bad. There's been good parts. There's been rough parts. There's been some parts that haven't been his fault, but we definitely should talk about how under the radar Bo Naylor's second half has gone around baseball. With more volume, he would have been in the rookie of the year conversation. But that also supposes he would have followed the same trajectory. Like, let's say he would have started in May instead of June or July. or June.
He had a lot to work on. Like I said, it's a debate for another day, and I think it took working through some of that stuff at both levels. But I'm not quite convinced that it would have been quite as linear as that.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. There's no guarantees. I mean, but it's just really impressive how he's come on here at the end. And
he's been fantastic. He's been one of the best,
best
offensive catchers in baseball, honestly, over the last 2 to 3 months.
We're going to get to more prospects here in just a little bit. Jeff will talk about the draft a little bit. And I don't know, we'll set up the rest of the week to talk about the final week of the Terry Francona era.
The MLB playoffs are around the corner, which means the clock is ticking on your chance to get 100 times your cash on daily fantasy baseball. Baseball has never been more exciting than it is now with studs like Acuna, Betts, and let's see, they have Ohtani in the ad, but who's going to actually be in
Angels
the season?
Playoffs? No.
Who's someone? Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman,
Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts.
Pick more or less on stats like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more for up to 100 times payout on sleeper. I don't know. I'm not someone who knows a lot about the daily fantasy one, but if you can pick Miles Straw on home runs, do that every day. Bet less. Bet less than one every day. Get your picks right and you could win big. That is my big recommendation. Miles Straw, home runs, less. Triston McKenzie walks more, apparently, is what we've learned in the early going, or the late going, I guess, more, I should say, of this year. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. You get a $100 match in your first deposit. Terms, conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details.
No game for the Guardians Monday, but Tuesday, as we said, 6:10 on your Sirius XM app. Make sure you're listening in. I would watch that thing too, but I would also listen on Sirius XM. Just search Guardians on the app. I'm excited for that series. You know why? Like we said, Hunter Green, Lucas Giolito. It might not be his last start. So he's pitching Tuesday. This is how the rotation sets up. So you have
I bet you they get 2 starts out of him.
I think so. Might as well. So he pitches Tuesday, which obviously lines him with the pitch Sunday based on regular rest. Bieber goes Wednesday. Cal could go Friday based on his last start. And then you could go to McKenzie Saturday based on starting today. And then Sunday you could go back to Giolito, which means obviously Gavin Williams is out of the equation, which wouldn't be a shock. I do think he's there for insurance at this point. And I'm sure Giolito would like 2 more starts just to go out and put a last thought in teams' minds before the offseason to sign him to a contract. So it should be an interesting week. What I say, Wednesday was Bieber and Andrew Abbott, and the Reds, they're fighting for a playoff spot, and the Ohio Cup is on the line. I know the Reds are fighting for a playoff spot, but let's be honest, the Ohio Cup trumps the playoffs, right? Like that's obviously the most important thing. The Reds are concerned about the Ohio Cup. The Guardians are
2.5 behind the Cubs right now. So every game matters to them, and I don't know who else they have.
Every game of the Ohio Cup matters, Jeff. Every Ohio Cup game matters. What you got to learn.
Like the Lake Erie Trophy, wasn't that the one?
Yes, the battle for the barge is nothing. Okay, this is way bigger than the battle for the barge. Because you know what, the battle for the barge is preseason. This is regular season, so this matters.
I know people got annoyed at this throughout the year, but I also want to point out. So they have So luckily for them, they have the Guardians and St. Louis. So for Cincy, they have a really easy row home, but no one has it easier than the Twins, who end with the Rockies and the Athletics. Detroit is viewed as having Detroit is viewed as having the second easiest one with the Guardians and the Royals. But man, that Royals team feeling feisty here at the end. They gave up any chance at the highest chance of number 1 overall pickdom with that.
Speaking of the draft, Jeff, can we talk about Friday real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. You texted me.
Look, I'm not saying you should. The team doesn't want to lose. The players don't want to lose. They put a lot of work in, so I understand from that aspect. But at this point, the Guardians need to be. It would be more beneficial to lose based on the draft, based on next year's draft, all the stuff that goes into that. Right? You'll talk about that in a second. But brutal Friday, a brutal way to win. Like there's brutal ways to lose and there's brutal ways to win. We've watched Emmanuel Clase below this 12th save of the year. That's been hard to take a lot of nights because you expect him to be good, and it's happened in very frustrating fashion, right? Because infield singles and little bleeders and errors, and that happened again on Friday. So they blew the lead, and it's against the Orioles. The Orioles need the game, and I'm like, okay, well, improve that draft stock, right? And then David Fry, who didn't even start the game, ends up with the walk-off hit. Glad he was in the game instead of Cam Gallagher, but maybe for once we should have seen Cam Gallagher for once. The Guardians can't even lose the proper way when they need to lose. Like it's hard enough to go out there and watch Emmanuel Clase blow saves the way he has, but then to go out there and say, okay, we're not even going to improve our draft standing. Emmanuel Clase is going to get the blown save in the win, and we're also going to get the win and not improve our draft standing. Like you can't even lose properly, right?
Yeah, it was frustrating and kind of humorous in a way if you look at it. Between the Royals, the Rangers, and those first two Baltimore games, there were 8 games where they did the opposite of what they were supposed to do.
Right.
The teams they should have beat, they couldn't beat. The teams they should lose to, they were beating. It was really weird. And why does this stuff matter? Well, right now they are half a game up on Detroit for the 8th pick. And I know people, again, and we've had several comments on my focus here, but this stuff matters for a reason. And 2.5 behind the Mets. Cleveland has a 2.7% chance right now at the top overall pick because there is a lottery. It's something new for Guardians fans who've never experienced Cleveland in the lottery before. 5.5% chance if you are the Mets at 7th. And the other big thing is, honestly, this year's class, if you follow college baseball a little, there is Travis Banzini. I think it's Travis, right? Banzini. At Oregon. There's J.J. Weatherholt, the West Virginia guy.
Nick Kurtz, who, I don't know, I'm starting to think might end up going 1 if Oakland's there. You got Nick Kurtz, you've got Chase Burns, you've got Jack Caglione, and I know this is why I need to have my list in front of me. That's just Brody Brecht and Tommy White. Like that's 7 kind of elite college performers. And that's not counting someone like Connor Jackson, the prep guy who a lot of people love. So just being up higher, there's a chance someone jumps you and you drop. So it's just getting those opportunities, not to mention the draft money that is there. But there's some really interesting talent. And some of these guys, I mean, we've seen this past year, Waldrop's in AAA. We've got Cruz and Skeens and in AA and Langford in AAA. A lot of teams are moving these guys quickly through. And it's not just about picking 7th. So picking 7th has a lot of value in a class that is very prep week, college heavy, because that means that help can get there before Jose is. And there's money too. When you have money, it allows you to control your class.
Yeah, and there's odds. There's a chance to move up. Like that's the other thing. I mean, last year, the teams that picked at the top won the draft. Was it Oakland moved back twice, I believe, right?
And 2024 is a Comp A year for Cleveland, right? Not Comp B. So
yeah, it's a Comp A year.
You're not going to get a pick from the Rookie of the Year class, but hopefully next year with Kyle Manzardo, we'll see. You'll hear a lot about the draft over the offseason because, Jeff said, it's going to matter because the Guardians are going to be in position to be higher in the lottery, and it's going to be a good class.
Pirates, Nationals, Tigers, Rangers, Twins, and then you had. Or is this after this? No, I think that's what it was supposed to be beforehand. So it's like we had some moving and some change, and it's going to be, interesting. Oh no, I'm sorry. That is with the jumping and moving in there. So that's how that worked. But still, there's going to be changes. There's going to be, like I said, we'll have a fun night on Lotto night. Maybe we should end up live streaming that one to discuss it. But I would
love that.
It's going to be something to pay attention to. But right now for this team, if you want an impact bat, I like a lot of the guys in the minors. I don't know if I'm going to label anyone a future impact bat in the immediate future. So if you're hoping to land an impact bat, it's probably in next year's draft. It is probably from picking high and getting someone who could move quickly.
Nick Kurtz. Speaking of impact bats, real quickly before we get out of here today, if you haven't heard, we can talk about this more because we don't have a lot of time today, and there's more to talk about. But AFL class for the Guardians. If you're not familiar with the Arizona Fall League, it is a month-long league that used to be in later November. Now it's kind of early October to early November, where a lot of prospects go to get some additional reps they missed them during the year. And some of them, they're looking to kind of finish off their skill set and be ready for the majors, whether it's the next year or two. Teams don't really send good pitchers there because of innings, protection, and the ball just flies there. It's not a great environment for pitchers to be in. So you do have to take the hitting results with a grain of salt because of the environment and the lack of good pitching. But it's still fun to watch, still fun to follow and think about. And Cleveland's got Jase Medical going there, who everyone should be excited about. Gimeinez, who finished the season in Columbus on a home run binge, to be excited about. And there's some interesting pitchers, too. There's Ross Carver, who I'm interested in. We can talk about him later this year. Ryan Webb, who we're both interested in. Jake Miller is an interesting name who is recovering from Tommy John. And then they got a couple of arms there, too. We'll cover that more in the coming weeks on the AFL. But those are the guys
Cole Miller's brother.
Yes, Cole Miller's brother. That's right. Yeah. Christian Cairo, Eric Zabrowski, Brad Hanner.
Yeah.
And the other
Ryan
thing, too,
Webb,
is
who we talked about a lot on the show.
And the other thing is, too, that the last year the AFL had made their games more streamable online. So that's fun. And there are parks that have StatCast data. So we can get StatCast data on Jase Medical for the first time, as well as maybe Carver, Webb, and Miller. We already got some on Manzardo, but all good stuff.
Very much so. Yeah. It's, like I said, even though the games don't really seem to matter, there's still a lot of matter left in this. They're seeing players perform. There is, seeing where this draft pick is going to fall. Again, no, it's not everyone's favorite talk, but it's interesting, especially when you got, someone like Kansas City winning 6 in a row, the Mets losing 4 in a row. A lot is still up in the air in spite of the season coming to an end. But we want to thank you all for being here on Part of the Ride. Remember to rate and review, download daily. It helps. Be an everydayer. Join in, comment, and as we always say, go, Guardians, go. Or in this case, go lose, maybe.